So for those who are wondering, the trip to Germany was wonderful. The thing I liked most was every afternoon about 3 o'clock, almost everybody who wasn't at their jobs would stop and have coffee and a treat. They have good treats. I miss the pastries a lot. A beautiful place, and thanks again to those who made it possible for me to be away for so long. Well, who's ever baled hay? Anybody here? Yeah. Yeah, baled hay. And if you haven't baled hay, who's ever been out weeding the garden at noon in August? Okay. You get the idea of what I'm going for? Once you're done weeding or once you're done baling hay, what do you want more than anything?
Water. Drink water.
Water, yes. So imagine having just baled 40 acres of hay, or having weeded, my dad would plant quarter acres of gardens. Ugh. Imagine weeding a quarter acre of a garden and being so thirsty that the only thing you can think of is that long, cold drink of water. And even though we really enjoy that feeling of that first drink of water, when we become that thirsty, it takes a toll on our bodies. In fact, by the time we notice we're thirsty, we've already caused stress on our bodies. The more thirsty we become, the more dehydrated we become. And dehydration in the human body is a problem. Excuse me. The human body is composed of 57 to 60% water, which means every fiber of our being functions best only when we have enough water in our systems. Insufficient water in our bodies causes fatigue, confusion, headaches, and all sorts of unpleasant side effects. And the longer we avoid drinking water, the more dehydrated we become. And as dehydration progresses, our bodies begin to shut down, inch by inch, organ by organ, muscle by muscle, cell by cell. Dehydration is a serious condition, and the only way to cure that condition is by ingesting fluids, either drinking water or getting them in an IV. Now, our bodies can become seriously dehydrated, but so can our souls. And a thirsty, dehydrated soul is just as harmful to our well-being as a dehydrated body. And our souls thirst for something greater than ourselves. We know this because every archaeological excavation in the last 2 centuries has found a space within the community, a space for worship, which tells us it's not just us. We were born with a need for something greater than ourselves. We were born with a need for the divine. So there's a thirst in our souls that needs to be filled with something that can satisfy that thirst. Because when our souls are thirsty, we suffer. When our souls are dehydrated, not only we suffer, but everything and everyone around us suffers. On the day called Pentecost, Jesus' first followers gathered together in one room. Ever since Jesus had gone off to heaven, the followers had been left with a thirst and a longing in their souls. For 3 years, they hadn't had to think about filling their souls. Jesus had been right there with them, walking, talking, teaching, praying, telling them what to do. And with Jesus gone now, they struggled to understand what that had all meant. They struggled to provide something that would feed the thirst in their souls. Now, the followers knew that they were supposed to do Jesus' work of healing, teaching, preaching, and baptizing, but without him there, without their rabbi, without their Messiah, they were reluctant, they were scared, and their souls were becoming dehydrated. See, up until that point, when Jesus ascended, up until then, he had been there to guide them, to direct them, to cheer them on, and even scold them when they were deliberately dense. He would fill their souls, and without Jesus, their souls were empty. They were dehydrated. So on the day we Christians call Pentecost, the Holy Spirit came into the room and filled the followers. The Holy Spirit blew through the room like the wind that comes with a powerful thunderstorm. And just as a thunderstorm brings rain, the Holy Spirit filled and quenched the thirst in the souls of each of Jesus' followers. That thirst in their souls had been getting emptier, and now it It was filled to overflowing with the presence of God. And suddenly they remembered with clarity everything Jesus had taught them. They remembered what it felt to be alive and excited to share the good news of Jesus. They remembered what it felt like to be filled with passion and excitement for sharing God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit with others. With the presence of the Holy Spirit in their lives, the souls of the followers were filled, and they knew, as long as they stayed connected to God, they would never be spiritually dehydrated again. They could always be full of the presence of God. Well, in the 4th chapter of John's Gospel, Jesus approached a woman at a well in Samaria and asked the woman for water. Now, the first listeners would have audibly gasped at that point, because the feelings, the hostility between Samaritans and everybody else in Israel was similar to the hostility between the Palestinians in Gaza and the Jews in Jerusalem. So to go up and ask this woman for water was just like going up to an enemy and asking for help. People on each side saw no good reason to have anything to do with the other. So when Jesus approached the woman, she was really taken aback. She questioned why Jesus, a Jew, would ask her, a Samaritan woman, for water. And Jesus told the woman that if she knew who she was talking to, she'd be asking him for water. Well, the woman was a little confused. Jesus had nothing to draw water with. And water in those days in a well was called living water because it was the rain from heaven. So she knew that Jesus had nothing to give her in terms of giving her living water. So Jesus went on to explain that the woman had a body that might thirst, but he was far more concerned with the thirst in her soul. After all, she was married to several men and now was living with a 5th man. She was an outcast among the women in her village because, well, let's face it, she was perceived as a homewrecker. She was lonely for human contact and kind of looking for it in all the wrong places. And she was lonely in other ways because this woman was lonely for God. She was thirsty for God. And the more she tried to quench that thirst in other ways, the more dehydrated her soul became. She was thirsty for God, but she was looking to quench that thirst in all the wrong places. So Jesus told her if she believed in Jesus as her Messiah, as God with her, she would never be thirsty for God again. Well, the woman begged Jesus for the living water that only he could provide. She was thirsty for God, and she needed the living water that was Jesus. And he gave it to her, and she went to tell the rest of the village about this miracle. Friends, I believe that too often we go through life with dehydrated souls. Like the woman at the well, we look for anything and everything to quench our soul's thirst. And too often we look for the wrong things in the wrong places and the wrong people. Like the woman at the well, we forget that there's something going on in our souls, and we forget that we're thirsty for God. So here are some clues to figure out how to know if we're thirsty for God. If we're tired, even though we've slept enough, chances are we're spiritually dehydrated. Okay, who gets up in the morning and thinks, I'm still tired? Yeah! If we're tired of helping others, chances are we're spiritually dehydrated. I'm not even going to ask. If we're hungry but can find nothing to satisfy that hunger, we're spiritually dehydrated. Maybe I'm not the only one. Open the cupboards. Look in the refrigerator. And there's nothing that appeals to me because I'm hungry for something, but that hunger is for God. If we look to others to fill our souls and quench our thirst for unconditional love, not only will we be disappointed, but we will be spiritually dehydrated. If we want to change, but we don't have the energy to try, we are spiritually dehydrated. If we're always looking for God's love in all the wrong places, in all the wrong substances, in all the wrong people, in all the wrong food, we're spiritually dehydrated and we're dying of thirst. Well, we don't have to be quite so dehydrated, friends. Because on this day of Pentecost, God sent the Holy Spirit to those first followers whose souls were so parched they could barely be in contact with God. On this day we call Pentecost, God sent the Holy Spirit to fill the soul of the first followers until they could not help but live their faith in everything they did, everything they thought, and everything they said. And on this day of Pentecost, God invites us to open our souls, to open our lives, to open our hearts to the presence of God, to say, Jesus, fill me up. I'm thirsty and I'm tired of being thirsty. I'm tired and I'm tired of being tired. I don't know how to move forward and make the changes that I need to, and I want to make those changes. God, fill me up. If we're at the place when the phone rings and we wish people would just leave us alone, we need to be filled up with the Spirit. If we're discouraged, disgusted, and just ready to go into hibernation, it's time to ask God to send the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts and souls. And that can happen for us on this day, my friends. Even if we don't think we're quite that dehydrated, quite that thirsty, this is a day to say, okay, God, fill her up, because I want to be your person in the world. I want to be the person who's so filled with your presence that I cannot help but do, think, and say things that reflect my love for you and your love for others. All we have to do is ask. And the Holy Spirit will come and fill us to overflowing. That's even better than a long cold drink after we're done baling hay. Amen.